This is a case study about a married couple living in New Jersey. Both are 36 years old and planning on having kids soon. The wife works for Amazon and makes pretty good money with $500,000 of total compensation. They have $1.8 million of savings as of the beginning of the process, and they wanted to work with a certified financial planner to do a review of their full financial picture. And here are the questions that they had before reaching out. In New Jersey, housing is very expensive where they live, so they've always rented, and they're looking into buying their first home. So they're asking themselves, should they buy it? How they can best afford it? And also, the wife has income that is made up of Amazon restricted stock units, RSU for short, and because they have never sold it, it's grown to be over 40% of their assets. How do they handle that? They also receive a good sum of money when they got married as a wedding gift and also early inheritance, and they've always left this uninvested. The husband handles the investment side of their financial picture and usually goes for low-cost Vanguard broad-based index funds, which I am a huge fan of. But this money coming from his in-laws, I think gave him a little bit more anxiety around investing it, given also it was intended to help them buy their first home. And overall, are they investing the right way with the rest of their money? And the wife, working at Amazon, sees her colleagues who are older burning out. So she wants to know if she can be work optional at age 50 or age 55. When I was listening to their concerns, the questions I didn't hear is, do they have enough life and disability insurance? Should they create an estate plan? Are they taking advantage of all the tax savings available to them? And how much should they save for college? Today, I'm going to talk about the recommendations, how I came to them, and how it's implemented. We're going to talk about diversifying down their Amazon stocks. It ended up being less taxes than they were expecting, how to max out all their tax advantage savings, and some of the minor logistics that they had to put in place to make that happen. In the end, they kept housing decisions as a lifestyle-driven choice and not a purely financial one, ultimately recommending them to buy more life insurance, especially before having kids, and redesigning their investments. So we're going to go over all of them today. But before we do, a little bit of disclosure. This video is for educational purposes only. It is based on a real-life client of mine, but even though I gave them specific recommendations, it doesn't mean it applies to you. And when I do talk about products that I recommended to them, it doesn't mean it's the right fit for you. Please do your own due diligence and work with your own certified financial planner when making investment decisions. So we started by looking at where they are today. And first at their cash flow. The wife makes $220,000 of cash-based compensation at Amazon and anywhere between $200,000 to $300,000 of restricted stock unit whenever it vests. Their lifestyle cost matters a lot, so we confirm the values using Monarch Money, which is a very good tool to calculate and summarize all your transactions and give you a really good overview of how much you're spending and where you're spending it. They thought they were spending about $128,000. Monarch Money and the work that we've done confirm it's about $140,000 a year, slightly higher, but they're very, very close. The only savings that they're doing in a retirement account is the traditional 401k plan at Amazon, where in 2025 is $23,500 a year. They've heard about the Backdoor Roth IRA. They don't know what it is and how to execute it. But another savings is actually the fact that the wife is receiving stock-based compensation and not selling it. So that's in a form as a way of saving and investing. So at 36, this is their net worth. Because they don't have a home, their balance sheet is fairly straightforward. The wife has a traditional 401k with $200,000 in it, a Roth IRA with about $28,000 in it, Amazon stocks accumulated to be $701,000, and taxable account, the two of them combined have a little over $500,000. The husband has a traditional IRA that he rolled over from an old 401k plan, about $197,000. So their overall liquid net worth is $1.8 million, which is a very fortunate position to be in. And one of the questions that they had is, are we doing the right things? And how do we leverage this resource, this income that we have to build the best life possible? So upcoming, we're going to talk about their investment mix. Amazon makes up a very big chunk, $701,000. The husband, who handles most of the investment decision-making, has chosen to invest primarily in broadly diversified United States stock funds through Vanguard. And for the past 10 years, that was the right choice to make. It has grown to $906,000, making up close to half of their net worth. They have a smidget of international stocks, not enough in my opinion. They have some bond funds, which I was a little curious about, and they just thought they needed to be more conservative at some point. And they had some lifestyle funds, some bond funds, and they saw this template that Vanguard provided that said you needed some bonds, so they bought some. And finally, the $182,000, that is the cash that's been sitting idle, uninvested, because that was money intended for the home purchase that was received as early inheritance. It is a very nice position to be in, but we have room for improvement. So there are many positive things about the financial position that they're in. They make a good amount of money as a household, and their assets are also very high relative to their spending needs and age. But this also creates the complexity where things start to slip through the cracks, where money may not be invested the best way. Maybe they're paying more taxes than necessary and just missing opportunities. Fortunately for them, husband had the ability and the willingness to handle the details of the implementation. So a one-time planning engagement where a DIYer gets guidance from a professional turned out to be pretty ideal for them. So I'm going to talk you through each section of their financial plan and what we did with them. And I want to put life insurance first and talk you through them, because this was a gap in their financial plan that they didn't think about that turned out to be a big risk factor. So I put this quote here: insurance protects the short-term risk of death or disability so you can enjoy the long-term rewards of proper financial planning. And they definitely do not have enough life insurance. Amazon provides their employee a base level of life insurance of 2 times their salary or up to $300,000. This is without you needing to do health qualifications. Given her salary is $220,000, she has reached a cap and has $300,000 of life insurance. This is not enough to replace 1 year's worth of income, so they definitely need more. At Amazon, you can get up to 11 times your salary, up to $2.2 million, whichever is lower. But one problem that I have with tying your life insurance to your employer is that employer-based plans usually only cover cash-based compensation and not stock-based compensation. But a bigger problem that I see is that it locks you into employment if your health deteriorates. There are clients that I work with in their 40s where they still have kids that are dependent on them. They know they need life insurance, but there has been some kind of health event that has shown up, whether physical or mental, that stops them from being able to qualify for life insurance. If the wife working at Amazon goes through the health screen, turns out healthy, and she is able to get and buy $2 million of life insurance, she has coverage today. But if in a decade she wants to change jobs, change companies, and at her new employment, she wants to get the same level of life insurance, she will likely have to go through health screening again. And at that time, if her health, physical or mental, has worsened, it may affect her ability to qualify for the same level of life insurance. So it locks you in a position where if you leave your company, you may lose the life insurance that you are dependent on. So that's why I recommend getting private term life insurance outside of your employer and lock into coverage when you're healthy. Because at that point, for the next 30 years, you don't have to do a health screen again, and you get to keep your coverage no matter what you do with your employment choices. So I ran some scenarios after putting in all their variables, what their goals are, what their savings rate is, how they're invested. And the husband, who has been struggling to find work the past 2 years in his desired field, ends up being a stay-at-home dad. If the wife passes away, their sole income is gone, and they're dependent solely on the savings that they have today. An 87% probability of not running out of money is a pretty good position to be in, but definitely not as good as it could have been had the wife had a long and healthy life. The only change is the wife has $2 million of life insurance that the husband will get when she passes away. And that alone shows, hey, you're back in the green with a very high probability of not running out of money throughout your life. So that was how I came up with the value of $2 million. There's a lot of rules of thumbs out there that would suggest you need 10 times your salary. And for this wife, that would mean you would need $5 million of life insurance, but they have a base amount of savings already and their expenses are low. So it is important to look at all the variables out there and model it out to see how much life insurance you need. The husband, because we're assuming he doesn't provide income to the household, if he passes away, it doesn't show it as a negative event. But I do think this is the wrong way of looking at this. A stay-at-home spouse contributes a lot to the household, and it is very expensive to replicate. And imagine the wife having a very high-stress job where she travels a lot, going through grief and losing spousal support. This would definitely put her at risk of not being able to sustain her high-paced work output. And she's already aware, looking at her colleagues who are older, that burnout is a reality in her field. It's not a stretch to see that if she loses her husband and becomes a single mother, that it would be even more difficult to avoid burnout. So I also recommended a healthy amount of life insurance for the husband because his passing would put the wife's income at risk, similar to how if she passed away, the household income would go down. But all this is just financial planning, and it's absolutely useless unless we implement it. So we got quotes from a trusted insurance agent for $2 million, and it chose 30 years because they are planning on having 2 kids, and we want to make sure that there's life insurance coverage until the children are done with college. So 30 years was a safe number. It does increase the premiums a bit more, but it gives you the option of allowing you to keep and have life insurance if you need it down the road, and you can always cancel earlier if you don't need it anymore. So we got quotes from a variety of of insurance carriers. The premiums for the wife came back anywhere between $1,500 to $2,300 a year, and it would benefit the husband if she passes away. She started applying for one of the more affordable ones. Her health screen came back much better than expected, and the premiums were actually lower, $1,165 a year, and she ended up buying it. The husband's case was a little different. For the same level of insurance, they are the same age. Because he does have a pre-existing health condition, his premiums are higher, double that of the wife's. During the application process, the insurance companies were asking for medical records that he didn't feel comfortable sharing, so he ended up choosing not to get life insurance. And that's the reality of financial planning. Even though the plan didn't turn out the way we wanted it to, we got somewhere and we took a step forward. The wife got $2 million of life insurance for the next 30 years that she wouldn't have had otherwise. So now let's talk about disability insurance for the wife. This is something people often forget to think about, but it's quite necessary because the chances of someone who's 36 years old passing away in the next 20 years is quite low. But the chances of that person being disabled, short-term or long-term at some point in their life, is much higher. Amazon only covers 60% of the cash-based compensation. And that is a big drop if there is a long-term disability event. Her total compensation goes from over $500,000 down to $132,000 a year. Fortunately, it is tax-free. And fortunately for them, it does turn out to be enough because they live below their means. They've never touched money from selling Amazon stock. If you're used to spending $140,000, it's very easy to go down to $132,000 a year. So this level of coverage at least prevents financial catastrophe. If they want to completely replace and get 60% of coverage for the total compensation, they would need external plans. One of the main questions that they had is, should we and how should we buy a home? Because they feel that paying rent is throwing money away, which is a very common sentiment. Currently, their rent in New Jersey is $2,850 a month, which they can easily afford. And once they have kids and need a bigger home, they can even go up to $3,500 per month and easily accommodate that in their budget. A good thing for them is they're also willing to continue renting to wait for the right home. This is important because a home purchase, especially today, is very expensive and you do not want to rush into this. A top priority for the wife is convenience. She needs a place that makes it easy for her to get to the Amazon physical office. This was in 2025 when return to office was starting to be implemented. She already knows living very close to the Amazon office is out of their budget, but as long as she has good public transportation, she was willing to live a little further away. They have a good group of friends that they want to stay near as well. As a part of the core scenario, we ran and modeled buying a $950,000 home with 20% down payment for 30 years at a 6.85% interest rate. New Jersey home price is expensive, and this is just what they need to pay to have a home that is close to work and also close to their friends. So let's take a look here. If it all happened in 2027, the home purchase, their rent is $34,200 a year. Now, if they bought a home at the beginning of 2027 with the same criteria above, now their housing cost goes up significantly, more than double to $79,000 a year. And that's not even including the cost of maintenance for a home. A good rule of thumb is to use about 1% of the home's value as an annual maintenance cost. And it's pretty expensive. So once they saw this, they realized, renting isn't that bad. The sad reality is, in today's market, renting and buying a home is very expensive. It's just relative to buying a home, renting ends up being more affordable for them. So I suggested to them, they can still purchase a home if it's meaningful for them, but treat it as a lifestyle choice and not a financial one, because the math just doesn't make sense for you to buy a home when you can rent for something cheaper. And finally, people don't often think about this, but you can put more money down and pay lower interest costs. And for them in particular, this exercise was helpful to bust a few myths about home ownership. Even though renting means you don't experience the home appreciation, you can make up for that because instead of the down payment being put into a home, it can be left in the stock market to be invested. And that may make up for the lack of home price appreciation. So now that they're not in a rush to buy a home, what do they do with the early inheritance, the money that they set aside for the down payment? I suggested if they wanted to keep it very safe, they could invest it in Vanguard's 0 to 3 month Treasury bill ETF. I treat this almost like a money market fund. It's not risk-free, but it is very low risk. It pays a 3.6% yield as of end of April. And the nice thing for them is that Treasury interest income is not taxable on the state level, on any state. So the yield alone is higher than their high yield savings account, and they don't have to pay state income tax as well on the interest income. the thought of investing it into the stock market also came to mind. But I shared with them that 5 years is too short of a time frame in the stock market to have any certainty that your money will grow. If we look at rolling return periods from the last 40 years, every day's return, it's a coin flip, whether you will make money or not. 53% positive, and the opposite, 47%, you lost money. 12% of a single day from the last 40 years ended with significant negative returns. If you look at a full month's investment, there's a higher chance of a positive return, but 10% of those times ended up with losses of greater than 5%. Now, 1 year for some people is a long time, but for the stock market, it's a blink of an eye. 78% of the years ended up in a positive return, but 12% of those years ended up with the losses of greater than 10%. Now let's skip ahead and look at 5 years, which is their time frame of decision making. There's an 80% chance of positive return, but 11% of those years, they ended up with losses of greater than 10% after 5 years. Maybe there's a little bit of room for risk taking, but I suggested no more than 20%. And if they did want to invest in the stock market, they are DIY investors and value simplicity. So I recommended Vanguard Total World Stock for the broadest exposure possible from one fund. And it's a very low cost, low expense ratio fund, and it invests in every single stock in the globe. So now let's move on to another big question that they had, which is what to do with their Amazon stock. The wife's employment, which makes her $500,000 a year, and stock ownership in Amazon doubles up the risk. And it doesn't really make sense to do that. So I ran a scenario first to see what if Amazon went to zero? What if the $701,000 in Amazon stock that they had today just poof went away and got to zero? It would take them down to 96% probability of success, assuming that she works until age 55. This is very good, but this is not all too surprising because they live below their means. There's still 2 more decades of working and making money, and they already have $1.1 million of non-Amazon investments. This high probability of success doesn't mean that they should keep Amazon stock, but it does suggest that they can afford to take the risk of holding Amazon stock if they wanted to sell stocks over time to maybe spread out and lower their tax liability. So a couple of tax advantage diversification strategies that we explored were protected puts and exchange funds. Exchange funds are not the same as exchange traded funds, which are commonly known as ETFs. And to my surprise, when I looked at the SEC documents, it seems that employees are able to use these kind of strategies to protect their Amazon stock exposure with prior approval. But protected puts is a very expensive strategy. When I ran this analysis on September 18th, 2025, the Amazon stock price was $226. If you bought a put option, which says if Amazon stock goes below $220, we're going to make you whole up to $220, but only for a year. But in order to give you this level of insurance, here's the premium we got to charge, the put option of $24 to protect you per share. And that cost of insurance for 1 year is 10.7% of the stock's value. And if they wanted to protect a little over half of their Amazon stock position of $380,000, that means they would have to pay upfront $40,000 for that 1 year protection. So that's a very expensive strategy to do every single year, and it doesn't really make sense. Exchange funds has been growing in popularity, I think because cash offers a very competitive and compelling option. For this client, it's not a good fit because there are a few legal requirements for a fund to stay compliant. One is they got to lock your money up for 7 years. You just can't get it. And if somehow you can, you got to give up quite a bit of equity to get your money back. And because for the next 5 years, there's likely going to be a lot of changes with this family, with kids coming in and buying a home, having their money locked up for 7 years is not a good thing to do. One common issue that you see with exchange funds is that they're taking in shares of stocks from different investors and pulling them together enough to make a diversified fund. And instead of contributing dollars, you're contributing your Amazon stock or Microsoft stock or Google stock, and you own a certain share of the exchange fund based on how much stock you contributed. But you got to think about the logic here. People are trying to diversify and get rid of the stocks that they don't want to hold anymore. And there's maybe a reason for that. And what we see in these exchange funds and other exchange funds is that even though you can diversify your single stock risk, in this case, Amazon, because there are also other people in the tech sector who are worried about their stock doing really well and they want to cash out a bit, but don't want to pay the taxes. An exchange fund like this is likely going to be more concentrated in the tech sector. So you may not be as diversified as if you bought the S&P 500 index fund. Let's explore the most straightforward option of just selling it. Restricted stock units at Amazon vest over a 4-year schedule every 6 months. You don't get taxed when you get stocks granted to you. You pay taxes when it is vested. So it's the exact same thing as receiving cash-based compensation and then choosing to buy Amazon stock with it. So I asked them, would you take $300,000 of cash compensation and put 100% of that money towards Amazon stock? And the answer is no. We already know from their history that they're probably going to buy a Vanguard total US stock market fund. So one thing that we did that was a pretty easy and straightforward choice is to set up automatic selling of the RSUs when they freshly vest. So what this does, it at least stops the accumulation of Amazon stocks. But she still has $701,000 of Amazon stocks, and that makes up 40% of their investable assets. My goal is to make sure that not one single position makes up more than 10% of your investments. What you're seeing here is a spreadsheet that contains every single Amazon stock that the client owned at the time. The price is based on July 17th of 2025. And what you can do with these individual lots is to be a little bit more surgical about which stock to sell, because the stocks that have been bought more recently had a higher cost basis, right? It's worth $226 per share, but bought it for $204. And the stocks that were acquired earlier were acquired at a much lower price. So the goal is to sell the most amount of Amazon stock while minimizing the tax bill. You would sort it from the least amount of growth to the highest and just start selling in order from the lowest growth. If the client sold the first half, this is what it would look like. So selling in 2025, they're at the maximum long-term capital gains tax rate. Their New Jersey tax rate is also quite high, close to 9%. They make over $200,000 as a married couple. So there's also 3.8% in net investment income tax. And this should be all of the taxes associated with selling the Amazon stock. If they sold the first half with the least amount of capital gains, they would get back $379,000, $63,000 of which is capital gains. And applying this tax rate that we see here, that means there is a tax of close to $21,000. And that means they get back after tax $358,000. So after applying the tax, they end up losing about 5.5% of the stock value. I think it's a very common misconception that you see the tax rate combined of over 30%. You sell $379,000 worth of stock, well, over 30% of it is going to go away. No, because you have the cost basis that is not taxable. And the second half, because they have more growth associated with those shares, if they were to sell the rest of those and apply the same tax rate, they would get $331,000, half of which is capital gains, and there would be $52,000 of tax. So you're selling similar amounts of stock, but your tax bill comes out dramatically different. And that's what you can do with selling individual lots. The $52,000 tax ends up being 16% of the tax value. So it definitely makes sense to sell that first half of the stocks with the highest cost basis. So if they're smart about selling a half of their Amazon stock, they may only have about $21,000 of marginal taxes that they have to pay. And it is still quite a bit of money, but it would take their exposure from $701,000 down by more than a half to $331,000. Instead of having 42% of their money stuck in Amazon, now they have 20%. They're halfway through to the goal of having less than 10% of their stock in Amazon. But I felt that this was a good enough point that they were willing to execute. And I was happy with that because they have 2 more decades of work ahead of them. And there's a very high savings rate that is going into non-Amazon investment that is low cost and diversified. The percentage of stock in Amazon after the selling will continue to go down as more and more is added to other investments. They ended up selling that half on August 4th of 2025 when there was an open window that they could sell. And I was curious to see what has happened since. The money that they sold, they invested it into VT, which is the Vanguard Total World Stock Index ETF that I recommended. And as of the end of market close on April 30th, it was very intriguing for me to see that Amazon still would have done better, grown 25% as opposed to 17%, but it did so with a lot more ups and downs. So in my opinion, the client still made the right choice. I feel this is a necessary disclosure to add in here. You should never make investment decisions based on past performance. The second half is you should always be making investment decisions based on future performance, but nobody has the right crystal ball. So you just have to make the trade-off decision of what is more important for me. The cost of $21,000 of taxes unlock their wealth and protect it against single stock risk. And I think it's a worthwhile trade-off. So now that we're done talking about Amazon, let's talk about the rest of their investment portfolio, which is over $1 million. And what you'll see later is that set and forget can be a winning strategy. So this is their whole balance sheet, excluding Amazon. Let's go line by line here. The wife's Roth IRA, $28,000 is invested in the Vanguard Total US Stock Market Fund, VTSAX. And I think this is a very good starting point, but being global just allows you to be even more diversified. So I recommended them to sell VTSAX and to buy VT, the Vanguard Total World Stock Fund. It's a one fund solution. And if you make sure that dividend reinvestment is turned on, it's a set it and forget it approach to investing. And because all this happened in a Roth IRA, it's not a taxable event. The wife had 3 mutual funds in a taxable account, and she owned Vanguard US Total Stock Market Fund and also the Vanguard S&P 500 Index Fund. Both have performed very similarly, and they've held it long enough that they've more than doubled their money. Right? This is a clear sign that buy and hold can work. And so the recommendation is still to hold, because in my opinion here, it doesn't make sense to sell this fund just to put it into a Vanguard Total World Fund, because the taxes wouldn't be worth it. Now, they did have a Vanguard Lifestyle Income Fund, VASIX, that the husband has bought. And this fund hasn't grown that much because most of the income is from interest income. So there's not much price appreciation that would come from that. So the value is $33,500. Cost basis is $32,200. Selling this would not create a significant taxable event, and it would free up cash to invest into VXUS ETF, which is the Vanguard International Stock Market Index Fund, to get a little bit more of that international exposure that they're lacking in. The husband's Roth IRA and traditional IRA is very similar to the wife's Roth IRA invested in the Vanguard US Total Stock Market Fund. Very straightforward recommendation to put that into VT ETF. The taxable account is similar. VFIAX, which is the S&P 500 fund, has more than doubled. The recommendation is to hold. The husband has a smaller account, about $20,000, that he invests in individual stocks in, and has actually more than doubled. So I shared this was a personal preference of what you wanted to do with it. It's not a large enough amount of money where I'm concerned about you keeping or selling them. And this was a bit of his play account. Similar to Coinbase, some have done quite well, more than doubled his money at Coinbase. So I left it for personal preference as well on what to do with it. Let's look at college planning for high-income New Jersey residents. And the overall summary is don't use the New Jersey plan. Some of the drawbacks with the New Jersey 529 plan for this particular client is that their income is too high. Most of the benefit they are not entitled to, like the $750 one-time matching grant and the $10,000 per year state income tax deduction, is not available for them because they make too much money. And for the target date funds, they have chosen to use higher cost funds, which I'm not too big of a fan of, especially because target date funds tends to be the default choice for most people. I am a fan of index funds, and I can pick and choose and build a pretty good portfolio for the client, but the index fund options are not cohesive and comprehensive. It is missing United States small cap stocks. It is missing emerging market stock funds, and the funds that they did have are following different indexes. So it was like trying to put the card together using parts from different brands. Like they just don't work well together. But there is one benefit that my clients can likely benefit from using the New Jersey 529 plan. The scholarship is only for people who use the New Jersey plan and attend in-state college. And from my review, it doesn't seem to be subject to income or asset limits. If I'm wrong, please leave a comment down below and let me know. So how this works is if my client had the foresight to open a 529 account with the New Jersey plan, put $3,600 into it and held on to that account for 12 years, when their kid attends an in-state college, they could get $6,000 in scholarship. So that's a pretty good benefit. So my overall recommendation to them is contribute $3,600 per child upon birth to the New Jersey 529 plan to get that in-state scholarship. And to make sure there's enough money in the 529 to fund future expenses, I recommend it for a child born in 2026 for them to put $6,200 per year. And for the child born in 2028, for them to put $7,000 per year until the kid goes to college. And doing this and assuming some moderate growth, this could potentially cover 70 to 80% of in-state college tuition in New Jersey. And the rest can come from either savings or from cash flow. And for the $6,200 to $7,000 a year of contribution, I recommended them to use Utah's My 529 plan. It's what I use personally, and it's what I use for my clients, because they have very, very good customer support and they have very good low-cost investment options that work well together. And for people who are DIYers and appreciate a set it and forget it approach, I recommended the Utah's 529 plan's target enrollment day portfolios because it automatically reduces risk as your kid gets closer and closer to college age. Running the projections again, child one born in 2026, we use Rutgers for in-state tuition as proxy. projecting out the inflation rate of education, what it has been, college expenses may end up being close to $400,000 per child. And making a modest contribution of $6,000 to $7,000 a year per child puts you in a pretty good position to be paying most of it. So being a high-income household and living in a high-income state, they really need to maximize all of their tax advantage savings accounts. So the overall theme of this section is taking advantage of all the backdoor loopholes. So the first one is the Mega Backdoor Roth 401k. So for 2025, the wife is contributing $23,500 to maximize her contribution to the traditional 401k. What she didn't know was that Amazon offers an after-tax 401k contribution that can be converted to Roth 401ks tax-free. And this unlocks a maximum contribution limit of $70,000 as opposed to $23,500. And the Mega Backdoor Roth 401k is also phenomenal for people who are planning an early retirement because the original contributions to the Backdoor Roth 401k, you can take it all out when you quit your job without early withdrawal penalties because this was money that you paid taxes on already and you contributed into a retirement account. It never grew because it's just a contribution. So that's why they allow this loophole for you to pull money out at any time without a 10% early withdrawal penalty. And it's especially fitting for the wife here because, again, she's worried about burnout when she gets into her 40s and 50s. Now, keep in mind the growth part that you experience is not eligible for penalty-free withdrawals. But one of the pitfalls with the Mega Backdoor Roth 401k, and it is for this case for the Amazon plan, is that the total contribution limit of $70,000 for 2025, $72,000 for 2026, it's accounting for all employee and employer contribution. In this case, Amazon matches 2% of her contribution, which is $4,400 per year. If my client by herself has already contributed $70,000 already, she's already reached the cap with her own contribution rate. And that leaves no more room to receive the employer contribution. And that means she would have to forfeit the $4,400 per year of company match. Otherwise, she would have over-contribution penalties. Some plans, like the Apple 401k plan, has a maximize me always option, which is a really nice feature because it does all the math for you to make sure first you get your employer match and then you make your own contributions under that. But for Amazon, they don't have that. So we have to be really careful about setting up the right contributions rates so you don't miss out on the free money, one of the only free lunches in financial planning of the 401k match. So here's an example of how this may work for my client in 2026. Assuming $220,000 a year cash salary again, first, let's factor in what is the limit. It's $72,000 for a 37-year-old and accounting for the match that she would get of $4,400. And also her traditional 401k contribution is higher at $24,500 now. So it's 11.1% of her salary. So that means if we take the $72,000 limit, subtract the match to make sure we leave room to receive that, subtract the traditional 401k contribution of $24,500, that means there's $43,100 or 19.5% of her salary should go into this plan, the Backdoor Roth 401k plan. This is an incredible retirement tool because it allows your money to grow tax-free forever. And the $43,100 contribution, you can pull it out at any time after you quit your company. The second option that they haven't taken advantage of is the Backdoor Roth IRA. My client makes too much money. If they put money into a traditional IRA account, they cannot deduct that from their income. So they don't get a tax benefit today. They cannot put a single cent into the Roth IRA. But what they can do is step one, put $7,500 into the traditional IRA. Don't get a tax deduction. And then step two, make a Roth conversion because you never got a tax deduction on the $7,500 you put in. When it gets converted to the Roth IRA, you don't need to pay taxes on that. So this is a two-step Roth IRA and it allows a high-income earner to put $7,000 per year per person into a tax-free growth account. If you're eligible for it and you have the savings capacity for it and you don't need the money for a while, I think it makes absolute sense for people to take advantage of this because the alternative is for the $7,500 per year of contribution going into a regular taxable account, and any dividends, interest income, and capital gains is subject to taxes each year. And that just slows down your growth. Now, a very, very common pitfall where people mess up doing backdoor Roth IRAs is not accounting for something called the pro rata rule. If you have any money in a traditional IRA account, when you do a backdoor Roth IRA, you're going to have unexpected taxes. So you must make sure if you're going to do a backdoor Roth IRA, there is no money in a traditional IRA by the end of the year. And if you do it correctly, you need to report it on the Form 8606 when you file your taxes. So let's go through an example of a bad backdoor Roth IRA. If someone has $100,000 in a traditional IRA account and they contribute $7,500 to a non-deductible IRA and then convert it to a Roth IRA, which is the 2 steps of the Backdoor Roth IRA, the IRS is going to count a portion of this $100,000 as part of the conversion. How the math works out is $7,500 divided by the total balance in an IRA account. This is the normal traditional IRA. This is the non-deductible traditional IRA. And that means 6.98% is tax-free, or the inverse, 9.02% is taxable. So 7,500, 93% of the conversion is taxable. So you actually need to report $6,977 onto your tax return the following year. And assuming a straightforward 30% tax rate, that's an additional $2,000 of taxes that you were not expecting. Let's walk through the same example, but how to actually do it correctly. So someone has $100,000 in a traditional IRA. The wife had a traditional IRA with some money in it. What we did was we worked with the Amazon 401k plan and worked with them to move the IRA money back into the 401k plan. And that is okay. It's commonly known as the reverse rollover because typically a rollover is out of a 401k into an IRA account. So we do the opposite of that. And as long as we complete this before the year end and there is $0 in a traditional IRA, then you don't trigger the pro rata rule. For IRS purposes, they only care about money in a traditional IRA and they don't care that it's in a 401k. So now the wife, because we did do a reverse rollover, is eligible for Backdoor Roth IRA contributions. The husband is not eligible for the full tax-free Backdoor Roth IRA because he has no active 401k plan that he can roll his traditional IRA account into. But it does become an option if he becomes self-employed and opens a solo 401k plan or gains employment with a 401k plan. So in today's video, we've gone through all the major sections of their financial plan, and I just want to summarize the improvements that we experience. So they have less urgency of needing to buy a home for the sake of being homeowners, and the wife can really prioritize her own convenience when making housing decisions. And we successfully reduced their Amazon stock exposure by half, while only costing them 5.5% of the sold stock's value. We also stopped the additional accumulation of more Amazon stock by setting up the automatic selling of Amazon RSUs. We got $2 million more on life insurance that the wife needs. And we confirm that there's enough disability insurance to avoid financial catastrophe if the wife becomes disabled long-term. And we set up a contribution into new accounts that will enable them to put $50,600 per year into Backdoor Roth 401k and a Backdoor Roth IRA that will forever grow tax-free. And again, she's going to be contributing for the next decade or 2. So this is going to be a huge tax-free account down the road with early access and early retirement. And with the changes that we made to the investments, gained a little bit more international exposure, which reduces their dependency on the United States economy. It was very fun working with this client, and I can't wait to see how they turn out in 10 years. Today, we went through a lot of information. I hope you learned something from it. Thanks for watching.